Hey there. Today we're going to dive into a simple but honestly pretty profound shift that can completely change how you handle conflict in your relationship. We're going to explore a practice that really challenges our most basic instincts in an argument, and that's the practice of listening before you defend.
So let me just start with a question. Think about your last disagreement, okay? What was your main goal? For most of us, if we're being honest, it was probably to correct a misunderstanding, right? To defend our intentions, or to just clarify our side of the story. But what if your role isn't to immediately counterattack? What if instead, your first job is just to absorb what your partner is feeling?
And this brings us to a huge reframing of what conflict is even for. We tend to think of it as this battle of facts, a debate to be won. But that approach, it almost never leads to connection. So let's redefine the objective entirely.
Look at this. On the left, you've got the old goal, proving a point, which basically puts you on opposite teams. But on the right, the new goal is creating emotional safety. And that puts you on the same team. Suddenly, your objective isn't to win against each other anymore, it's to work together to protect the relationship itself. The entire dynamic changes when safety, not victory, becomes the top priority.
So you might be thinking, if being defensive is so unhelpful, why is it our first instinct? Well, the answer is actually wired into our biology. It's all about how our brains perceive threat. So let's take a look at what's really going on in your brain during those first few critical seconds of a tough conversation. The second your partner says something like, "you never," or "I feel like you don't," your nervous system can just react instantly. It doesn't really hear a feeling, it hears an attack. You feel accused, misunderstood, blamed, and your natural protective instinct is to push back, to explain, to correct the record, right? And this right here, this is the core of the problem. Your partner is trying to express a hurt, which is a really vulnerable thing to do. But when that vulnerability is immediately met with a wall of defense, their brain doesn't register your good intentions. Nope, it registers a threat. And once you're both in that threat mode, well, true understanding becomes pretty much impossible.
This is the message that real listening sends. It de-escalates everything. It calms the nervous system down. It says, hey, I'm an ally, not an enemy. Just remember, trying to explain yourself without first absorbing their feelings, it feels like a dismissal. But absorbing their feelings without being defensive, that feels safe.
Okay, so talking about this in theory is one thing, but what does it actually look like in the real world? Let's walk through a super common example to see just how powerful reflection can be. Just imagine your partner says this to you. Oof, it's a loaded statement, right? It's full of emotion. Your immediate impulse is probably to list all the ways you do prioritize them, to point out how busy you've been and to defend yourself. But let's just see what happens if we choose a different path.
The difference here is night and day. The defensive response, that's not true. It immediately turns the conversation into a fight about facts. And that only leads to things getting worse. But the reflective response, it does something pretty incredible. It just names the feeling. You're feeling unimportant right now. There's no argument, no justification, just reflection. And that act alone helps regulate the emotion.
And this is absolutely key. This isn't about never getting to explain your side of things. Of course not. It's about the order you do it in. You have to reflect first. Once your partner feels heard, once their emotion is validated, you'll see it. Their body softens, their tone changes. Then and only then is there actually space for your explanation to be heard.
You see, when we jump straight to defending ourselves, even with the best intentions, we often send an unintended message. We're basically saying, your feelings are wrong. And when someone feels like their emotions are being dismissed as inaccurate, they don't back down. They actually dig in. They get louder, they repeat themselves, all in this desperate attempt to finally be understood.
Look, this is a skill. And just like any skill, it takes practice. So I want to give you a really simple, structured exercise you can try this week to build up that listening muscle. It's super straightforward, and it only takes a few minutes.
That's it, just 5 minutes. The real power of this exercise is that it's so short and structured. It creates this safe, manageable little container for you to practice a totally new way of communicating without getting completely overwhelmed. So here's how it works. You set a timer for 5 minutes. For those 5 minutes, one of you is the speaker and the other is the listener. The listener's only job, their only job, is to listen and reflect back what they're hearing. You can use phrases like, okay, so what I'm hearing is, or it sounds like you felt, and then, when the timer goes off, you just switch roles.
Now to make this work, the ground rules are everything. Seriously, no interrupting. The speaker gets their full 5 minutes. And this is a big one. The speaker isn't allowed to correct the listener's reflection. The goal isn't to be perfectly accurate. It's about the listener making a genuine try to understand. And most importantly, absolutely no defending yourself until it's your turn to be the speaker. This structure is what creates the safety.
So why are we even doing all this? What's the long-term goal here? It's all about building something called emotional containment, which is really a cornerstone of any deep, trusting relationship.
Emotional containment is a true strength. It's the ability to just hold space for your partner's difficult feelings, their anger, their sadness, their fear, without immediately trying to fix it or dismiss it or make it about you. You're basically communicating, I can handle your feelings. They are safe with me. This is how you build real emotional trust.
This slide really just boils it all down. Reactive couples, they're constantly interrupting, escalating the emotional thread. But reflective couples, using the skills we've been talking about, learn how to regulate their own emotions and even help their partner regulate theirs. And the result? Way shorter conflicts and much quicker, more meaningful repair.
So if you remember one thing, remember this. Every single time you choose to reflect instead of react, you are shrinking the space for defense, and you are growing the space for connection. Safety grows when someone feels heard before they feel corrected.
The next time you find yourself in one of those difficult conversations, I want you to just notice the question that pops into your head. For most of us, that little internal question is, okay, how do I defend myself?
And I'd invite you to consciously replace that question with this one. Before you even think about your defense, just ask yourself, how do I understand them first? You can always explain your side later, but if you skip the understanding part, your explanation is never going to land.
And let's be really clear about this. Choosing to listen first isn't weakness. It's not admitting you're guilty. In fact, it's an act of incredible strength and emotional leadership. To be able to stay present and just listen when you feel attacked, that is a superpower in a relationship.
If you want to learn more ways to replace reactivity with reflection in your relationship, go ahead and subscribe to Resolve Together. We are dedicated to helping couples turn conflict into connection. Thanks so much for being here.